My name is Scarlett, and at 34 years old, I'm sitting in my Tesla outside my parents' house this Thanksgiving, remembering the cruel words from last year's dinner that still echo in my mind. They told me to go live in the streets if I couldn't get my life together. What they don't know is that I could buy every house on the street, including the one they're so proud of. Before I share what happened at this year's dinner, I'm curious where you're watching from. If you've ever been underestimated by family, please subscribe and let me know in the comments below. The thing about my family is that they've always had a very specific definition of success, and I've never quite fit into their neat little box. My mother, Margaret, 62, has been a real estate agent for 30 years, and she measures worth by square footage and zip codes. My father, Richard, 65, just retired from his position as a bank manager, and to him, stability means a 9-to-5 job with a predictable salary and a retirement plan you can calculate down to the penny. Then there's my older sister, Jennifer. At 37, she's everything my parents dreamed of in a daughter. She married Brandon straight out of college, a man who wore suits to family barbecues and talked about his law school ranking within 5 minutes of meeting anyone. They live in a 5-bedroom colonial in Westchester that Jennifer loves to call their mansion, though it's really just a bigger version of every other house on their street. They have 2 kids, Madison and Ethan, who take violin lessons and speak Mandarin because Jennifer read somewhere that successful children need to be trilingual by age 10. My younger brother Christopher is 31 and works on Wall Street. He's the golden boy who followed the path laid out for him since birth. Cornell for undergrad, Wharton for his MBA, and then straight to Goldman Sachs. He just got engaged to Nicole, whose father owns a hedge fund, and their wedding is going to be featured in Town and Country magazine. Christopher collects watches and makes sure everyone knows exactly how much each one costs. The extended family isn't much different. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, married a surgeon and hasn't worked a day in her life, but she loves to give career advice to everyone else. Uncle George, my father's brother, owns a chain of hardware stores and thinks anyone who works on a computer is basically playing video games for a living. Their kids, my cousins, all followed traditional paths too. Everyone except Emma, the youngest, at 22, who just graduated with an art degree and is already getting the same treatment I've been getting for years. 5 years ago, I was supposed to be like Jennifer. I was in law school at Columbia, engaged to a guy named Marcus, who worked at a consulting firm, and my parents were already planning where to hang my graduation photo next to Jennifer's and Christopher's in their hallway of achievement. But something inside me was dying a little more each day. I'd sit in constitutional law class and feel my soul leaving my body, floating up to the ceiling and looking down at this person I didn't recognize. The day I dropped out was the day my family's perception of me changed forever. I remember the phone call to my mother. The silence was so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then came the tears, the accusations that I was throwing my life away, the demands to know what Marcus would think. When I told her Marcus and I had already broken up, she actually wailed like someone had died. I moved into a studio apartment in Queens, the kind where you could sit on your bed and reach the refrigerator. My parents told everyone I was taking a semester off for health reasons. Then a year passed and the story changed to me finding myself. By year 2, they just stopped mentioning me at all unless someone asked directly. And then my mother would get this tight smile and say I was exploring my options. What they didn't know was that I was building something. Late nights turned into early mornings as I coded, tested, failed, and tried again. I was developing an AI platform that could revolutionize how companies handle data processing. My studio apartment became my office, my laboratory, my whole world. I lived on instant ramen and determination, wearing the same hoodie for days while debugging code that would eventually be worth hundreds of millions. My family thought I was doing freelance web design or maybe teaching yoga. They never really asked for specifics. When I'd show up to family gatherings in my beat-up Honda Civic wearing jeans and a simple sweater, they'd exchange these looks like they were witnessing a tragedy in slow motion. Jennifer would always pull me aside and offer to lend me money loudly enough for others to hear, while Brandon would mention he knew people who were hiring if I was ready to be serious about my future. Previous Thanksgivings were exercises in endurance. I'd sit at the table while Jennifer talked about their latest renovation, how they'd imported marble from Italy for their bathroom. Christopher would discuss his bonus and which Porsche model he was considering. My parents would beam at them, then turn to me with these pitying looks and ask if I was dating anyone nice, which was code for anyone with a real job. The worst part was the setups. My mother had a roster of eligible men she'd try to parade past me. There was David the dentist, who spent our entire blind date explaining why my generation didn't understand hard work. Thomas the accountant, who asked if I'd be willing to relocate for his career. And most recently, Tyler Henderson, whose main qualification seemed to be that he was breathing and had a 401k. Facebook was another special form of torture. My mother's page was a shrine to Jennifer and Christopher. Jennifer's promotion to PTA president got a 3-paragraph post. Christopher's engagement announcement might as well have been a novel. But me, I existed in the gaps. The careful crops of family photos where you could sometimes see my shoulder or the edge of my hair. When her friends asked about all 3 kids, she'd say 2 were thriving and change the subject. 3 weeks before this Thanksgiving, my life changed in a way my family couldn't have imagined. I was in a boardroom on the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper signing papers that would transfer my AI company to a tech giant for $500 million. The deal included keeping me as CEO with an annual compensation package of $35 million plus bonuses and stock options that would make even Christopher's Wall Street friends jealous. The moment was surreal. 5 years of 18-hour days of being told I was wasting my potential, of watching my family treat me like their favorite charity case. And now I was worth more than all of them combined would make in several lifetimes. The Forbes photographer was there taking shots for their Top 30 Under 35 Tech Innovators feature. The article would run the week of Thanksgiving, talking about how I'd built one of the most innovative AI platforms in the industry, from a studio apartment in Queens. But I didn't tell my family. Not yet. 2 days after signing, Jennifer started the annual Thanksgiving group text. She assigned everyone their contributions like she was conducting a military operation. Christopher would bring wine at least $100 per bottle, she specified. Brandon would handle appetizers from that new French place downtown. And me, I got assigned roles. Store-bought is fine, she added, followed by a smiley face that felt more like a pat on the head than actual warmth. The text chain continued with Jennifer's detailed instructions about dress code. We should all look nice for photos, she wrote, then added Scarlett. I can lend you something if you need it. The assumption that I couldn't afford appropriate clothing was so automatic she probably didn't even realize she was being insulting. My phone rang the next morning. It was my mother, and I could tell from her tone she was in concerned parent mode. Sweetheart, she started, which was always a bad sign. Your father and I were talking, and we want you to know there's no shame in needing help. If you need money for gas to drive here for Thanksgiving, we can send some over. I'm fine, Mom, I said, looking out at the Manhattan skyline from my new penthouse, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Central Park. She sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested I was being prideful. You know Christopher's old room is still set up. You could stay with us for a while just until you find some stability. There's no shame in coming home. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. I was sitting in a $15 million apartment, but to her I was still the lost daughter who needed rescuing. Oh, and Mrs. Henderson mentioned that Tyler is still single. She added, her voice brightening with false hope. He's doing very well at the accounting firm. Makes good money, very stable. I could arrange for you two to meet at Thanksgiving. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Then I sat in my penthouse surrounded by success my family couldn't even imagine and made a decision. I would go to one more Thanksgiving, one more evening of condescension and pity and suggestions that I get my life together. But this time would be different. I spent the next week preparing not for confrontation, but for revelation. I had my assistant compile a portfolio of videos of my speaking at tech conferences, photos with industry leaders, articles about the company. Not to hurt them, but because I was tired of being their cautionary tale. The night before Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my penthouse past the home office, where I'd taken calls with Silicon Valley's biggest names, past the awards and recognition plaques on the wall, and wondered what it would feel like to finally be seen by the people who were supposed to know me best. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold, perfect weather for what was about to unfold. I dressed carefully, choosing understated designer pieces that whispered rather than shouted their worth. Brunello Cucinelli cashmere sweater, Loro Piana trousers and a Cartier watch, thin enough to be overlooked unless you knew what you were looking at. The Tesla Model S Plaid waited in my building's garage, but I decided to park it a block away from my parents' house. No need to raise questions before I was ready to answer them. I'd stopped at the wine store and picked up a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2010 worth about $3,000, but I'd had them put it in a generic gift bag. As far as my family would know, it was something I grabbed from the grocery store. The house looked exactly the same as it had for 30 years. Same cherry red door, same perfectly manicured lawn that my father treated like a personal kingdom. Same brass numbers that my mother polished religiously. I stood on the porch for a moment, gift bag in one hand, keys to my Tesla in the other, and took a deep breath. Jennifer answered the door and her expression went through several rapid transitions. Surprised that I'd actually shown up, a quick scan of my outfit, and then that familiar look of patronizing approval. "Scarlett, you made it," she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, you look nice. Is that new?" Before I could answer, she was already turning away, calling over her shoulder, "Brandon, come help Scarlett with her things." She probably had to park far away. Brandon appeared, all 6 feet 2 inches of condescension, wrapped in a Yale Law sweatshirt that he definitely wanted everyone to notice. He reached for my gift bag like he was doing me a favor. "Here, let me get that. You know, Scarlett, I've been meaning to call you. We have an opening for a receptionist at the firm. It's entry level, but the benefits are excellent and there's room for growth if you apply yourself." "That's thoughtful," I said, following them inside. The house smelled like my childhood turkey and rosemary and my mother's apple pie, but the warmth of the aroma couldn't mask the chill that followed me through the rooms. In the living room, Christopher was holding court, showing off his new Rolex Daytona to Uncle George and some cousins. "This one goes for about 60 grand on the secondary market," he was saying, angling his wrist so the light caught the gold. "But I got it at retail because I have a relationship with the dealer. You have to have a purchase history to get the good stuff." He caught sight of me and grinned. "Hey, Scarlett, come look at this. Do you even know what a Daytona is?" I smiled and admired his watch, letting him explain the movement and the waiting list and the investment value. While I thought about the Patek Philippe sitting in my safe at home, the one I'd bought to celebrate my first million in profit, but never wore because I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Aunt Patricia intercepted me on my way to the kitchen, her voice carrying that special tone she reserved for life's disappointments. "Scarlett, dear," she said, clutching my arm, "are you still playing with computers? You know, my Rebecca just got promoted to senior manager at her consulting firm. Such a stable career path. Maybe you should consider something more traditional." I was saved by Cousin Emma, who pulled me aside with an apologetic look. She was wearing a paint-splattered jean jacket that I recognized as an act of rebellion against the family dress code. "Ignore her," Emma whispered. "She's been giving me the same speech all morning about my useless art degree. At least you escaped the law school prison. I'm proud of you for that." I squeezed her hand, the only genuine moment of connection I'd had since walking through the door. Emma had always been different, always seen through the family's obsession with conventional success. My mother appeared from the kitchen, flour dusted on her apron, her face lighting up with that complicated expression she reserved for me. Love mixed with disappointment, hope tangled with resignation. "Sweetheart, you made it," she said, air kissing my cheek to avoid the flour. "Did you bring the rolls I brought wine?" I said, handing her the bag. She peeked inside and smiled tightly. "How thoughtful. Christopher brought several bottles of Camus, but we can always use more. Why don't you help Jennifer with the place settings and try to be in the photos this year? Won't you, Mrs.? Wilson from next door keeps asking why you're never in the pictures I post." The photographer Jennifer hired was already setting up in the living room, arranging lighting equipment like we were shooting for a magazine spread. Jennifer directed everyone with the efficiency of a film director, positioning Brandon and the children front and center, Christopher and Nicole to one side, my parents in places of honor. "Scarlett, you stand in the back," Jennifer instructed, "behind the kids, and maybe take off that watch. The reflection might mess with the lighting." I stood where I was told, feeling like a ghost in my own family's portrait. Through it all, I heard fragments of conversation that cut deeper than any direct insult. My mother telling Mrs. Wilson from next door, who dropped by to borrow vanilla extract, 2 of my 3 are doing wonderfully. Christopher just got engaged to the most lovely girl, and Jennifer's Brandon just made senior partner. Uncle George asking loudly if anyone knew what exactly I did for money these days. Jennifer whispering to Brandon that they should offer to pay for my therapy, because clearly I had issues with commitment and success. Christopher joking to his fiancée Nicole that I was the family's cautionary tale about following your dreams. Each comment was a small cut, but together they formed a pattern of dismissal that I'd grown so used to I'd almost stopped noticing. Almost. Dinner was announced with the formality of a state occasion. Jennifer had place cards because of course she did, and mine was at the far end of the table sandwiched between Christopher's fiancée's teenage brother and Emma, as far from the center of action as geometrically possible. The dining room looked like something from a magazine, all candlelight and crystal, the table groaning under the weight of Jennifer's need to impress. She'd even hired servers for the evening college kids in black aprons, who moved around us like shadows. As everyone settled in, I noticed the hierarchy immediately. My parents at the head, Jennifer and Brandon, at their right hand, Christopher and Nicole at their left. The successful children within arm's reach, while I might as well have been in another room. Before we begin, Jennifer announced, standing with her wine glass, "I just want to say how grateful we are to be together as a family, celebrating all our blessings and successes this year." She launched into a speech about Brandon's promotion to senior partner, complete with details about the cases he'd won and the billable hours he'd logged. Brandon sat there with a satisfied smile, occasionally interjecting with false modesty. Christopher went next, pulling out Nicole's engagement ring, to show everyone again, talking about the proposal in the Hamptons, the private beach, the champagne, that cost more than most people's rent. Nicole giggled and flashed the ring, while my mother actually wiped away tears of joy. "This is what success looks like," my father said, raising his glass. "Hard work, dedication, and knowing what you want from life." He looked down the table at me. "Not everyone has that clarity, but we hope everyone finds their way eventually." The interrogation started with the soup course. So Scarlett, my father began setting down his spoon with deliberate precision. "Tell us about your job situation. Are you still doing that computer thing?" Before I could form a response, Jennifer jumped in. "Dad, we need to be realistic here. Scarlett's been trying the startup thing for years. Maybe it's time to consider that not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur." She looked at me with what she probably thought was sympathy. "There's no shame in admitting you need a real job with stability." Brandon nodded sagely. "That's why I mentioned the receptionist position. It's honest work, good benefits, and you'd be around successful people. You might learn something." My mother sighed heavily. "I've been telling my friends you're taking time to find yourself, but Scarlett, you're 34. The finding yourself phase should be over. Mrs. Peterson's daughter just got married, and they're expecting. She's your age. I don't think comparing me to Mrs. Peterson's daughter is—" I started, but Christopher cut me off. "The problem is you don't understand how the real world works," he said, pointing his fork at me. "You can't just play around with computers in your apartment and expect to make real money. Look at me. I put in the time at Goldman Eye Network. I wear the right suits. I play the game. That's how you succeed." Nicole touched his arm adoringly. "Christopher's being considered for vice president next year. Youngest in the firm's history." The comments came faster now, building on each other like a symphony of condescension. Uncle George mentioned that his neighbor's kid made websites for small businesses and charged $500 each, suggesting I could try that for steady income. Aunt Patricia brought up her hairdresser's daughter, who taught computer classes at the community college, implying that was about my level. Jennifer mentioned again that their kids didn't understand why Aunt Scarlett didn't have a house like everyone else. "Your car," my mother said suddenly. "Sweetheart, are you still driving that old Honda? It's not safe. Maybe if you got a real job, you could afford something reliable." I took a sip of water, my hand steady despite the fury building in my chest. "Remember when she was in law school," Aunt Patricia said to the table at large. "We all thought she'd be the next Supreme Court justice." She laughed, but it was sharp cutting. "Now look where following your passion gets you." "At least she's not on drugs," Uncle George offered helpfully. "That's what I assumed when she dropped out. These days, you never know." The main course arrived, and with it an escalation in cruelty. Christopher started telling a story about a homeless person he'd seen near his office, somehow connecting it to people who refused to conform to society's expectations. The parallel he was drawing wasn't subtle. Jennifer talked about a documentary she'd watched about failed startups, how 90% of them fail in the first year, how the founders end up in debt and despair. She kept glancing at me, making sure I understood the message. "You know what your problem is," my father said suddenly, his voice rising. "You think you're special. You think the rules don't apply to you. But life doesn't care about your feelings or your dreams. Life rewards hard work and conventional success." "Richard," my mother said softly, but he was building to something. "No, Margaret, she needs to hear this." He stood up, glass in hand, and I knew what was coming. "We've coddled her too long. We've enabled this fantasy. 5 years," he said, holding up his hand. 5 years of watching you waste your potential. You had everything. The education, the opportunities, the connections. And you threw it all away for what, to sit in some apartment playing with computers." The room was silent now, everyone watching. "You're an embarrassment," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Do you know what I tell people when they ask about you?" "Nothing. Because what can I say? That my daughter is 34 and living like a college student." Now Jennifer stood too. "Dad's right. We've all been tiptoeing around this, but Scarlett, you need to wake up. This isn't sustainable. What happens when you're 40, 50, still freelancing, still alone, still pretending you're going to make it big?" Brandon cleared his throat. "From a legal perspective, you should be thinking about retirement planning, health insurance, property investment. These aren't things you can just figure out later." My mother was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "We just want what's best for you. But if you can't get your act together, if you refuse to be sensible, then maybe you should just go live on the streets, since you seem determined to end up there anyway." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. "Go live on the streets." Aunt Patricia nodded approvingly. "Tough love. Sometimes that's what it takes. She'll thank you later," Uncle George added. Jennifer sat back down, satisfied. "We're saying this because we love you, Scarlett. We don't want to watch you fail anymore." I set down my fork with deliberate calm, the small clink against the plate, the only sound in the room. Then I stood slowly, smoothing my cashmere sweater, and looked at each face around the table. My family, who thought they knew everything about success and nothing about me. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for your concern. It's touching, really, how worried you've been about my well-being." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. "We're just trying to help." I pulled out my phone, the latest iPhone that none of them had noticed, and opened the Forbes app. "Since you're all so concerned about my future, I thought you should see something." "Jennifer, would you mind reading this headline out loud?" I handed her the phone. She took it with a patronizing smile that began to fade as she read. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock. "What does it say?" Christopher demanded. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. "Forbes Top 30, Under 35 Tech Innovators. Scarlett Williams, CEO of Neuralink AI, revolutionizing data processing from a Queen studio to a $500 million acquisition." The silence was deafening. "That can't be right," Brandon said, grabbing the phone. "This is some kind of joke." I pulled up my banking app, showing the most recent wire transfer. $8.3 million, my quarterly bonus that had hit yesterday. Christopher choked on his wine. "That's not possible." "The penthouse in Manhattan?" I continued conversationally. $15 million. The house in Malibu, $12 million. "Oh, and I just closed on an estate in Aspen. $20 million, but worth it for the views." My mother's face had gone white. "You're lying." I showed them the photo from last week, me standing between Bill Gates and Satya Nadella at the tech summit. Then the video of my TED Talk with 3 million views, the feature in Wired magazine, the patent certificates, the acquisition documents. $35 million, I said quietly. "That's my annual compensation as CEO. Plus bonuses, plus stock options." I looked at Christopher. "Your Rolex is nice, but I prefer Patek Philippe. More understated." Jennifer's hands were shaking. "But you said we thought you were struggling." "I never said I was struggling." "You decided that. You looked at me and saw what you wanted to see. The failure, the cautionary tale, the family disappointment." Aunt Patricia suddenly found her voice. "Well, I always knew you had potential. I was just telling George the other day." "No," I said firmly. "You told George I was wasting my life playing with computers. Those were your exact words at last Easter." My father sank into his chair. We didn't know. Because you never asked. Not once in 5 years did any of you ask what I was actually building. You were too busy telling me what I should be doing to hear what I was doing. Brandon stammered. If we'd known about your company, my firm could have handled the legal work. Christopher jumped in. I could have gotten you meetings with investors from Goldman. Jennifer suddenly smiled, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, sister. We should celebrate. Maybe you could invest in Brandon's new firm he's thinking of starting. And there it was. The shift, the sudden interest, the immediate calculations of what my success could do for them. Let me be very clear, I said, looking at each of them. The reason I never told you wasn't because I was ashamed or struggling. It was because I knew this would happen. The moment you found out about the money, I'd stop being the family failure and become the family ATM. That's not fair, my mother protested. We're your family. Family, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't tell you to go live on the streets. Family doesn't crop you out of photos. Family doesn't spend every holiday making you feel worthless. We were trying to motivate you, my father said weakly, by telling me I was an embarrassment, by setting me up with men whose only qualification was having a steady paycheck, by treating me like a charity case who needed your pity. I pulled up another app on my phone. You know what's interesting? Last year, when Dad was having trouble with the mortgage after his retirement package fell through, someone anonymously paid it off. That was me. I've been taking care of you while you were telling me I was a failure. My mother burst into tears. Real tears this time. And Jennifer, remember when Madison needed that special tutoring program that insurance wouldn't cover the anonymous donation to her school? Also me. Jennifer's face crumpled. Why didn't you tell us? Because love shouldn't be conditional on net worth. Because I wanted to know if you could love me without knowing about the money. And now I have my answer. I walked around the table addressing each person. Christopher, you think success is about the right suit and the right watch. You don't understand that I've had meetings in hoodies that were worth more than your entire year's salary. Brandon, you offered me a receptionist position at your firm. My company's legal budget is larger than your firm's annual revenue. Jennifer, you assigned me to bring rolls because you assumed I couldn't afford anything else. The wine I brought tonight cost more than your entire dinner. Aunt Patricia, Uncle George, you've spent years giving me advice about careers and stability. I've created more jobs in the last 3 years than you've had in your entire lifetime. The room was spinning with their shock, their calculations, their sudden reevaluations. Please, my father said. We didn't mean it. We love you. No, I said quietly. You love the idea of me when I'm successful. You love me when I fit your definition of worthy. But the person who spent 5 years building something from nothing, the person who refused to give up despite your constant negativity, you don't even know her. I moved toward the door, but the family erupted in desperate attempts to keep me there. Wait, Jennifer said, actually running after me in her heels. We should talk about this. Maybe we could have lunch next week. I could show you some investment opportunities Brandon's been looking at. Christopher cornered me by the coat closet. Listen, there's a guy at Goldman who specializes in tech portfolios. I could introduce you. We could do dinner in the city. Even Aunt Patricia was suddenly interested. You know, my son is graduating next year. He'd love to intern at a tech company. My mother grabbed my arm. Sweetheart, please, don't leave like this. We're family. We can work through this. Can we, I asked. Because for 5 years I've been invisible to you unless you needed someone to pity. Now suddenly I'm worth your time. That's not true, she protested, but we both knew it was. My father approached slowly like he was afraid I might bolt. I'm sorry for what I said. About the streets. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. In that moment, you absolutely meant it. You looked at what you thought was your failure of a daughter and told her she belonged on the streets. The fact that I have money doesn't erase those words. Brandon cleared his throat. From a legal standpoint, family reconciliation is important for estate planning. I actually laughed at that. Brandon, stop. Just stop. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a business deal. This is me finally understanding that success isn't about proving anything to anyone. But we're proud of you, Jennifer, insisted, tears streaming down her makeup. No, you're impressed by my money. There's a difference. You're not proud of the nights I spent coding until my eyes burned. You're not proud of the rejection letters I pushed through. You're not proud of the courage it took to walk away from law school. You're proud of the number in my bank account. Emma had been quiet this whole time, but now she stepped forward. Can I walk you out? She asked softly. I nodded, grateful for the only genuine soul in the room. As we reached the door, the others followed, still trying. What about Thanksgiving? My mother called. You haven't even had dessert. What about Christmas? Jennifer added. We could come to your penthouse. I could fly everyone to Aspen. Christopher offered desperately. I turned back one last time. You want to know the saddest part? If I had actually been struggling, if I had actually needed help, you would have let me fail. You would have watched me sink while telling yourselves it was tough love. The only reason you care now is because I don't need you anymore. Emma walked me to my car, or rather to where they thought my car would be. When I stopped at the Tesla, she gasped, "This is yours." I nodded and handed her my business card, my real one. You're the only one who ever saw me as a person, not a project to fix. Call me next week. I meant what I said about helping with your art. Not because you're family, but because you're kind. She hugged me, then crying into my shoulder. I'm so sorry for everything they put you through. Through the car window, I could see them all standing in the doorway watching. My mother was still crying. Jennifer was probably already calculating how to spin this on Facebook. Christopher looked like someone had punched him in the gut. As I drove away, my phone started exploding with messages. 47 missed calls within the first hour. Texts ranging from apologies to investment proposals to Jennifer's public Facebook post about her successful CEO sister, the first time she'd ever publicly acknowledged my existence with pride. The messages kept coming. Christopher tagging me in LinkedIn posts about family and success. My mother sending long emails about how she'd always believed in me. Brandon actually sending me his firm's portfolio for potential investment. But I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove to the real Thanksgiving dinner I had planned, the one with my team. The people who had believed in the vision when it was just code on a screen. The ones who celebrated every small victory and problem solved through every crisis, without once asking why I wasn't doing something more traditional. The next morning brought more of the same. Jennifer had posted a photo from dinner carefully cropped to make it look like I'd been there the whole time, with a caption about family supporting family through every journey. The comments were full of congratulations, people she'd never told about me suddenly learning I existed. Christopher had sent a formal email complete with Goldman Sachs' signature, proposing a family investment fund where we could pool our resources. He'd CC'd 3 of his colleagues already trying to leverage my success for his own advancement. My parents showed up at my penthouse building, somehow having found the address. The doorman called up, and I could hear my mother's voice in the background insisting she was my mother and had a right to see me. I told him to send them away, but politely. The irony was that I would have helped them. If they had come to me with humility, with genuine recognition of how they'd hurt me, with real interest in who I'd become rather than what I'd earned, I would have opened my door and my heart. But they came with the same entitlement they'd always had, just redirected toward my success instead of my failure. Emma was the only one who got it. She came to my office the next week not to ask for anything but to bring me a painting she'd made. It was abstract swirls of color that somehow captured both pain and triumph. This is what I saw that night, she said. You standing there, finally free from their expectations. She was starting her own gallery with 2 friends from art school. I offered to invest, but she shook her head. Not yet, she said. Let me fail a little first. Let me earn it. I don't want to wonder if I succeeded because of talent or just because I had a rich cousin. I understood that completely. Over the next 6 months, some relationships slowly began to rebuild. My mother started going to therapy, really working on understanding why she'd tied her worth as a parent to her children's conventional success. She sent me a real letter, not asking for anything, just sharing what she was learning about herself. My father took longer, but eventually he called just to talk. Not about money or success or failure, but about a bird he'd seen in the backyard that reminded him of one we'd watched together when I was 7. It was a start. Christopher and Jennifer struggled more. They couldn't separate my success from my money, couldn't see me without calculating what it meant for them. Jennifer invited me to things, but always events where she could show me off. Christopher only called when he had a business proposition. Brandon actually surprised me by sending a genuine apology, admitting he'd been threatened by my independence and had used condescension as armor. He didn't ask for anything, just acknowledged his behavior. It didn't make us friends, but it made us civil. The extended family mostly just gossiped about me now, instead of pitying me. Aunt Patricia told everyone she'd always known I was special, rewriting history with herself as the supportive aunt. Uncle George started every conversation with questions about the stock market, as if my success in tech made me an expert in everything financial. But the real growth came from unexpected places. I started a mentorship program for young women in tech, especially those whose families didn't understand their choices. The stories I heard echoed my own brilliant minds, being told they were wasting their time, that they should choose stability over innovation. One girl, Maria, came from a family of doctors who couldn't understand why she wanted to code. Another, Keisha, had parents who kept setting her up with nice boys with stable jobs instead of supporting her startup. They found in my story permission to persist, to believe that the voice inside them knew better than the voices around them. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, Forbes did a follow-up piece about my mentorship program. The photographer wanted to include a family photo, and I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I agreed, but only with Emma and my parents. Not as a statement of forgiveness, but as an acknowledgement that people can grow. My mother cried when she saw the published article, not because of the prestige, but because the story talked about the pain of family rejection and the power of staying true to yourself. She called me that night and said the words I'd waited 5 years to hear. "I'm sorry I couldn't see you for who you really were. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to earn my love. You deserved better." It wasn't perfect. Family rarely is. But it was honest, and that was enough. The deepest lesson from all of it wasn't about money or success or even vindication. It was about understanding that your worth isn't determined by your family's ability to see it. I hadn't built a company to prove them wrong. I'd built it because something inside me needed to create, to solve problems, to push boundaries. The money was nice, the recognition was satisfying, but the real wealth was in the journey itself, in the becoming, in the refusing to let other people's limitations become my own. I think about that Thanksgiving often, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of sad gratitude. Sad for the years of disconnection, for the pain that didn't need to exist. But grateful too, because hitting bottom with my family forced me to find my own foundation. Your family's inability to see your potential doesn't diminish it. Their lack of vision doesn't make your dreams less valid. Sometimes the street they tell you to live on leads to a path they could never imagine walking. Success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, just sometimes, the family that once told you to go live in the streets might one day find themselves knocking on your door, finally ready to see who you really are. But whether they do or not, you keep building. You keep creating. You keep believing in the vision only you can see. Because at the end of the day, the only validation that truly matters is the quiet voice inside that says, keep going. And that voice, it's worth more than $35 million a year. It's worth everything. I want to thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been underestimated by your family, if you've ever been told you're not enough, or if you've ever had to choose between their approval and your authenticity, I want you to know you're not alone. Share your own story in the comments below. What dreams did your family not understand? What success did they not see coming? Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of triumph over judgment. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by anyone else's inability to see it. Remember, the people who doubt you today might be asking for your advice tomorrow. But build your dreams for yourself, not for them. Thank you again, and remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success that speaks so loudly no words are necessary.